Hey, what's up? Welcome into another edition of UP Power. Keegan Cooper and Kevin McNulty with you. And Keegan, we have a lot to get into. Let's start with the showdown at Lambeau Sunday afternoon. It was a mess out there, but as we talked about on Friday, I was looking forward to that aspect, playing in the elements. For the Lions, it was the first time they've played outdoors this year, and they just pass every test, that Detroit Lions team. Packers fans might be disappointed. We'll get to the Packers in a moment, but a 24-14 win on the road in the division. They've won 6 in a row for the first time in a long time. Mm-hmm. They're 7-1 for the first time since 1956. The Detroit Lions are rolling.
Yeah, and I mean, Dan Campbell said in his post-game, you heard it in the locker room, they were prepared. They knew the conditions going in, and the expectations weren't any different for them. Right? They kept the ball on the ground. David Montgomery, I think, had a great day. And the Detroit Lions, gritty, and they get the job done. And Jared Goff, I mean, is he the MVP candidate? Is he the leading man? Probably right now. If the season ended today, he's the MVP. There's no doubt in my mind.
I would agree. I don't necessarily know if he'd get voted to be the MVP, but the way the Lions are going, it's tough to see. Of course, the Chiefs win again on Monday Night Football, just the way they always do, a one-possession game, and Patrick Mahomes does what he does. Now he has 2 veterans catching passes for him, and with Kelsey and DeAndre Hopkins. But Jared Goff he's the pro's pro, and he's a perfect leader for this team. I mean, we've been saying it since they started to have success last year with him at the helm, and I think it's good to remind people that when Goff first got to Detroit, when Campbell first got to Detroit, they didn't have this team.
No.
And so it started then building up, and Campbell said this week about Goff went through it then, and it was all the talk about how the Rams fleeced him in the trade for Stafford and Goff. And, at this point, I think both sides won. Obviously, the Rams, you're going to say they won anyway because they won a Super Bowl. That's fair.
Yeah.
But the Lions are on a Super Bowl track right now.
They are, yeah.
And at this point in the year, you're halfway home. I still consider 8 games halfway through the regular season. We just have a bonus game now. But 7-1, you're in a prime spot to take home field at Ford Field throughout the playoffs, and that cannot be understated how significant that is. But in this game, Campbell stuck to his identity. They get 2 touchdowns on 4th down. Amon-Ra St. Brown and then Jahmyr Gibbs later in the game. I wonder, does Campbell, and I'll give you my answer after I hear what you have to say, but in the playoffs, you saw what happened in the NFC Championship game when they had a lead and were still going for it. I think that's a big distinction. The first 4th down, the St. Brown touchdown, they were down a field goal. And then they were winning later when they went for it with the Gibbs touchdown. But I think that was the difference, that they had the lead and decided not to take points. But my question is, does Campbell ease up on the reins and decide to trust his kicker a little bit more in the postseason rather than being so aggressive like he is now in the regular season?
I think there's a happy balance, right? I think come postseason you have to, but it also depends on weather conditions and things like that. How much the wind, apparently it was super windy at Lambeau Field too.
It was swirling. They were talking about it on the broadcast.
Yeah, so I think it has to be a balance, right? I don't think Dan Campbell's going to change his identity and not go for it on 4th down. But I think also when you get into the postseason, and let's say you're at the end of the half, right, or you're near the end of the quarter, maybe you take the points just to get points on the board because you're going to get the ball back. Now, 4th quarter, if you got to go for it, obviously you got to go for it. But I think there has to be a happy balance. It's situational, right? And there's a lot of different factors that go into it. But I also think him being the head coach now another year and having the success, he's learned so much and grown so much that there are scenarios where he's, okay, we're going to take the points and trust our kicker. Okay, we're not going to take the points. We're going to go for it. And I think they were moving and grooving. on that second fourth down play where they decided to go for it. Jared Goff was moving the ball. David Montgomery was having his day on the ground. So I think they're like, we're going to go for it. I also think when you're so close, I think less than 5 yards, Dan Campbell's going for it every time on the goal line. I don't think they're kicking points. It's when you're 4th and 1 on, let's say, 4 and 7 on the 45 that maybe you, or 35 that maybe you say, okay, we'll take the points here.
I want to bring up St. Brown's touchdown celebration.
Oh, yeah, it is trending everywhere.
It's the Incarnate Word celebration, actually. Yeah. That was a small college in Texas. A guy did that standing on his head. Drake London of the Falcons did it, too. The Lions made it their profile picture on social media. I thought it was so hilarious. People were like, he's going to get hurt. I'm like, no, he didn't jump on his head. He did the whole headstand thing. But that was hilarious. St. Brown is so much fun to watch. I mean, the whole team is fun.
Yeah, I mean, really, when you up and down the roster, I mean, they're great to watch. I mean, David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, Jared Goff. The way that they scheme, I think, has been so interesting this year.
Well, yeah, they have a genius as their offensive coordinator. He looks like a genius a lot of the time, is how I'm phrasing that. But, yeah, the Lions just keep going. A big one this week, Sunday Night Football at the Houston Texans. Texans haven't been playing great. They've been banged up.
True.
But it's still going to be tough to go on the road in a primetime game.
Yeah.
Another time to show who they are in front of the country, and they won at home on Sunday night, week 1 against the Rams. But this one's a little different. AFC opponent. They have 3 AFC South games coming up. That's the opposite division from the NFC North this season. So you have the Jags and the Colts on the other end of this Texans game.
So that was
and then obviously more division games as we get going here in New Year's Eve, December 30th.
Yeah.
It's the San Francisco 49ers, a rematch of the NFC Championship game. So they got to build up to that. But again, you keep stacking wins, you're gonna have
you're looking good.
The best shot at home field advantage in the NFC. They do right now. I've said I think they're the best team in football. Dan Campbell yesterday, I played sound from him where he said, that's tough to say, but I feel like we can beat anyone. And I think that's your answer without being too cocky. Dan Campbell, I think I respect that answer. It's tough to say if we're the best team, but I feel like we can beat anyone. They can beat anyone.
They can.
They could beat the Chiefs right now. They did it last year. Pretty much the same Chiefs team, pretty much the same Lions team.
You're right.
I would love to see that game. It's not on the schedule. Just given the fact that I think it would be tight, and Patrick Mahomes never loses tight games. Perhaps we'll see it in New Orleans in February. Let's talk about the Packers and how much we want to freak out about the Packers, right? Because Jordan Love, he didn't look healthy in that game, but he also made mistakes that you can't make as a $225 million quarterback. So that pick six to Kirby Joseph was just can't do it.
And you can't.
And he had the pick six in the Rams game, which Packers ended up winning that one. Can't do it.
Yeah, and you see, if you watch the play, you rewind it, you see Jacobs is open over Kirby Joseph, but you got to throw that pass up. You've got to get it to him. This little side toss, I'm going to make a comparison, but Jordan Love is not Patrick Mahomes, right? And that to me looked like a Patrick Mahomes play that he makes because we've seen it.
Yeah, no.
Jordan Love, you got to recoup, change some things around. Those plays he can make, but in the right scenario. And I think that really was the tail of the game. Kirby Joseph picks it, goes 27 yards. It's instead of 10,
absolutely.
17.
In the end, it's only a 10-point win.
Yeah.
They didn't completely blow them out. It felt that way. I mean, the Packers got a touchdown, 2-point conversion in the fourth.
Yeah.
So, when it was 24-3, 24-6, it felt like a blowout. But in the end, the Packers weren't that far off. You're right. It's a huge play in that game.
Yeah.
And credit the Lions' defense because I think that was the concern going into this season. Could your defense play at a Super Bowl level? They have now. That secondary, I think Terrion Arnold's coming along, their first-round pick.
Mm-hmm.
Joseph's been awesome. Brian Branch has been one of the best defensive players in the league. Of course, he got ejected for that hit. And I texted you at the time that that's a huge loss for that defense because without Hutch, he's kind of the identity, even though he's playing on the back end, he kind of is the defense. Anzalone is that guy for sure all the time. But on the back end, it's Brian Branch, and he's been exceptional. So he got ejected, and Lions defense just stuck with it. That's really impressive. Aaron Glenn deserves a ton of credit for what he's done on that side of the ball because, again, Dan Campbell's more of a CEO head coach. He's not solely responsible for one side of the ball like we see quite a bit these days with head coach play calling. You know, Shanahan's calling the plays in San Francisco. Reed's calling the plays in Kansas City. Campbell's just overseeing everything. He's being the head coach. So his coordinators, he puts a lot on them, and they do a great job. I think the Packers, again, will be all right. They're going into the bye, and they're really banged up.
And they need to get healthy. And Jordan Love, you could tell, like
Plus, this is when he turned it on last year.
Yeah, true.
So if you're a Packers fan thinking, like, why did we give out this big contract to this guy after 1 year? It was because what he did Week 11 to Week 18 last season, plus the playoff game in Dallas. He could still do that again. And I think he gets that groin healthy. He's probably still feeling his knee a little bit, I would imagine, even 8 weeks later. So this bye is coming at the right time for the Packers. I mean, they're totally good at 6-3, in my opinion. Plus, they get a win out of the bye because they play the Bears. So they're going to be 7-3.
You already count the Bears.
Matt LaFleur's never lost to the Bears, and he's not going to do it in a couple weeks.
Hey, you never
on
know.
November 17th. That's not going to happen. So I need to check Shefty's Twitter because we are 1 hour away from the trade deadline.
Oh, and I have it for you right now. This was published on ESPN at 8:23 a.m. Eastern. The Detroit Lions have added a pass rusher here. Here you go. Here you go. And I think that is a really great ad.
It's pretty big.
Pretty
they did it. Zadarius Smith. It's not Myles Garrett, but you didn't have to give up what was Mike Tannenbaum's package for Myles Garrett, 3 first-round picks, a second-rounder, and Jahmyr Gibbs. Well, that's not happening. I think that's exactly who people were eyeing up. And on top of that, the Packers are getting Preston Smith from the Pittsburgh Steelers for a 7th-round pick. So that's something, too. You know, the trade deadline in the NFL, usually you're thinking about, wide receivers, maybe a back. But, I think just some depth on that defensive line for the Detroit Lions will go a long way. So,
live updates. Here we go. So huge for the Lions.
We still got an hour to go, so this isn't final. But Zadarius Smith, I mean, that's who a lot of people were eyeing for them. And Brad Holmes, has Brad Holmes done anything wrong as GM of the Lions?
I think him and that's what you love to see about the Lions and where the organization has come from and where they are now is the relationship between Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell and how really close that they are. Because sometimes you don't see that between head coaches and that relationship is great.
Well,
for them.
Zadarius Smith has already played for the Packers and the Vikings. He is familiar with the NFC North, so I don't expect anything else to go down the next hour for the Lions. So, I mean, Dan Campbell said they'll play with anyone. I think that's true, but Smith will have an impact one way or another.
Yeah,
I think that's pretty significant. So
huge.
There you go.
Yeah,
now the runway's open. Go get the number 1 seed and go into the playoffs feeling good. Ford Field, they're going to have at least one home playoff game, and maybe 2 of them. They're going to buy in home field. So be pretty big. We'll see what they can do last 7-8 weeks of the season. And again, I think the Packers are just fine. Let's switch gears to high school football because we had the first round of the postseason. It was the district semis in 11-man, the regional semis in 8-man. Mm-hmm. We have to begin with the big upset in Kingsford.
Not
Gladwin finally gets that win over a Kingsford team that just on Friday we were talking about how historic their regular season was. 9-0, 6-3 team coming in, and 18-15 they lose, and unfortunately turnovers.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah, I mean,
led to the demise of the Flivers this season. It's just kind of hard to wrap your head around. Kingsford being so dominant during the regular season, of course, they go to Menominee and get that tough win, 13-12. They proved that they could win those games, but then they were in another one this Saturday, and it just, you turn the ball over, bad things are going to happen. Meanwhile, Gladwin's defense, pretty suffocating.
Yeah, to stop a potent Kingsford Fliver offense that we saw all season in the regular season.
Right.
And you know, that it was tough to see. I mean, Kingsford is in it, right? But you go down the stretch and those little plays in the postseason, those little hiccups, that's what I'll call them, will, you know, see your season end, and that's what happened. Gladwin gets a field goal, fumble inside the red zone, and then Gladwin kneels it out. So,
yeah, Flivers out of the D5 playoffs just like that. I mean, they would have had another home game this weekend if they came out on top of that one. D6, two teams that were competing there, also done. Calumet gets knocked out by Kingsley, and Negaunee in a battle Friday night against Boyne City on the road. They lose that one by a touchdown. It was a Negaunee football game. They just came out on the wrong end of it. They had a lead. They led it 8-7 after they converted on a 2-point conversion. But Negaunee, I was thinking they had a good chance to move on. But it just flipped the other way. I think in the end, Boyne City made a couple more plays, and that was the difference.
Yeah, and I think sometimes you get into the postseason and you're a solid team and you play a decent game, and the cards just don't fall your way. And I think that's what happened, right? At the end of the day, Boyne City just made a couple more. They led by a touchdown, and the clock ran out, and that's it.
Meanwhile, Menominee, here we go again. You were out there on Saturday.
Oh, my gosh.
Tanner Turkoff and the boys.
It was a clinic. It was a clinic.
Well, they left nothing to be desired.
Yeah.
Either.
I mean, six plays in the first quarter. 6 offensive plays. 28-0.
And that's pretty incredible.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about that, 6 offensive plays, right? You know, they get the kick return, they get some good yardage on that, but then they're on a mission. It's very clear that the Menominee
we talked about it on Friday. I agree with you. Traverse City St. Francis coming in this Saturday. It's a big one, obviously.
Yeah.
For the district title.
Got to get over that hump.
Yeah, and just keep it rolling. I don't know if Menominee's victorious, if they'll have another home playoff game, but got to get through this week first.
Yep.
They seem to be on a good track in Division 7 once again.
Yeah. Yep.
So we'll see what happens there. Meanwhile, in D8, Bark River went on the road to East Jordan, a really good team. I thought the Broncos really fought in that one. They come out on the wrong end of it. I remember they were 5-4 in the regular season. 2 of those losses came to Iron Mountain, so I think they were a little bit better than a 5-4 team.
Yeah.
They showed that a little bit Friday night. They come out on the wrong end of that one. Meanwhile, Iron Mountain, no trouble with Manistee. They are the real deal. They are 10-0 in the season.
Yeah, and the Mountaineers, again, you have to keep going. You have to keep pushing, because the next week's going to be that much harder. Same thing for Menominee, right? You are now playing the best teams in the state of Michigan every week. So if you want to be the best team in the state of Michigan in your division, you have to play like that every single game for 4 quarters from here on out.
For sure, and because Iron Mountain and Bark River were in the same district, so East Jordan's coming to Iron Mountain this coming weekend. So That's a big one. I think the Mountaineers should feel good about that one. They won this round last year when they just their season this year to last year. I compare a lot because it's so similar.
Yeah.
They had the exact same schedule, went 9-0 in the regular season. They fell in the regional final last year, which would be the round they advance to if they win this weekend. Beale City is lurking, who knocked them out last year. We'll see, but Mountaineers need to take care of business this weekend and keep it rolling. Move to 11-0.
I agree.
On top of that, it's Robin Martela's last season as their head coach, so they got to do it for the coach too. A little bit.
A lot to play for the Mountaineers.
Yeah, absolutely. Now an 8-man. Let's talk about D1. Pickford rolled Munising. The Mustangs banged up.
Yeah.
Got blown out by him a week prior. Pickford is
the real deal.
They are that good.
They are that good.
That Norway-Ishpeming game, I want to talk about that because Ishpeming came out on top 44-38. They will be playing Pickford in the next round. That's a tough one for the Hematites, but they had a tough one at home this Saturday. I couldn't believe it. It was a real old-fashioned shootout.
Yeah.
And we'll get to Forest Park North Central. When they met in the regular season, it was kind of a similar game. Ishpeming made more plays in the end, both defensively and offensively, because there was a point in the third quarter where Norway got the ball back, and they were trailing for the first time in the second half, and they were forced to punt. They stopped airing it out a little bit, trying to get it done, on the ground a little bit more. Their offense stalled out. They gave it back to Ishpeming. Caden Luma led the Hematites down the field again, and then all of a sudden it's a bigger lead. I don't know if it was 2 possessions at that point with all the going for 2, because they went for 2 every time. It was hard to even keep track of how many touchdowns they had scored because it's not easy 7-7-7-7 like you're used to. But Ishpeming, Caden Luma, Grady Gauthier was great.
Wow,
the little Gauthier. He is little in stature, but not in his might on the field. He's a great player, shifty. Had a huge touchdown in the third quarter, and these were in the highlights too. Their stand at the end, Norway had a 4th down inside the 10-yard line. They go back corner, Colby to Owenby. Maybe I don't necessarily agree with the call, but that's what they went with. Broken up by Caden Luma, who could barely stand. This kid was getting hit on every play. Running down the field on a lot of those plays because, again, they scored so many points. But really impressive for Ishpeming, I think, to not play a UP team all year besides Pickford. Not really play at home. So finally they had this home environment. There are a lot of Norway fans there too, but at Ishpeming, as I said on Friday, I'm like, I think the town's really going to be out there for them, and they were. So they relished that moment. Credit to them. Caden Luma was awesome. And you know what? Not a great draw having to go to Pickford, but shock the world. Anything can happen. It's postseason.
I agree, and I think Ishpeming in 8-man proved with this win against Norway that they have a spot in the top ranks in 8-player football for sure.
Absolutely, because Norway was right at the top
there,
all year, and unfortunately, injuries kind of led to their end in the end once again. But a good season from Norway for Ishpeming. It keeps going. You got a chance to do something huge against Pickford this weekend. The odds aren't great, but we'll see. Division 2, we have a showdown because both of these games on Saturday, not interesting.
No.
North Central rolled, Forest Park rolled.
Yeah.
They meet again. I mean, it's exactly what we wanted. That's a Friday night game. We'll be out there. I can't wait to see these teams play again.
Yeah,
because it was a real shootout game, like I said, when they met not too long ago, only a couple weeks ago.
Week 9, last game, and I think it's simple for both sides. If you're North Central, how do you limit Vic and Kevin Giuliani? And if you're Forest Park, how do you stop Lane Gorzinski? Right? How do you and those? I say those 3 there are a lot of other players on both teams that are big, that play big roles, but those are the names that.
And obviously the guys in the trenches for both of those teams.
Yeah,
that's
the
a huge
line,
identity for both of those programs. I mean, 2 power programs.
Yeah, I mean, they are at the top of 8-man for Division II for the UP, and it shows, and it will be, I think, another shootout game. I think. Both teams are going to score, and I think it's going to be kind of similar to the Ishpeming-Norway game of who makes the big play down the stretch that turns the tide in their favor.
I agree. It was 45-34 when they met in Week 9, North Central on top. On the road in that one, they got to go to Forest Park once again this week, so that one's going to be tons of fun. I'm glad we get this matchup again. Maybe I'd prefer it be a little further down the road because I think these are 2 of the best teams in Division II for 8-man. But, it's happening. It'll all go down Friday night. Looking forward to it. College sports, because we have a guest on this podcast coming up in a couple of minutes. Alex Fatovic, the head coach of NMU men's soccer, will join us. Let's start talking about winter sports, actually, hockey. Early CCHA showdown between NMU and Tech. I think actually these games did give us quite a bit to talk about. When you think about Friday night at the Berry, Tech comes in 3-0, they win it. Scored twice on the power play, only one 5-on-5 goal. And that's the part for NMU that Dave Shayak was kind of hanging his hat on, that they only scored one 5-on-5 goal, and we had so many chances in front of our home crowd. We just did not convert.
Yeah.
And he mentioned they had more chances in that game than maybe any other game this season, even though they were scoreless. I think it was there where things were working in their favor, definitely a little bit more than the Arizona State series, where they were keeping the puck in the O-zone. That's a goal for them, not to be playing from behind and chasing. Unfortunately, when you get on the penalty kill and can't kill penalties, and Tech converts on 2 of them, then you are playing from behind, you're chasing. So that's how it went down on Friday, the way I saw it.
No, yeah, definitely. And I think that when you look at Northern's team, they are relatively young. That could be a concern.
Relatively young. They're younger than young.
Yeah, 16 of 28, I believe, are true freshmen. So that could be a concern later in the season, and as you go throughout the season, okay, guys, we've got to stay out of the box, because if not, we're going to put ourselves in a hole, because they're going to get a power play, and if they score. Now, don't get me wrong, Ryan Ouellette has been fantastic, I think, for the Wildcats so far this season.
Oh, he has.
But
he's a gem.
He is. But when you give him power play, eventually goals are gonna happen.
Yeah, you can't expect him to be a complete hero like Blake Pietolo was at times at Tech the past couple of seasons. But for the Huskies, I've been saying I think they're a really, really good team. They already have 6 points in the conference.
Yeah.
That sets them up way better than last year. Of course, they needed to win the Mason Cup to get in last year, and that's what they did. But it's not the top line, the big goal scorers, the Jack Works, got a C on his sweater. You know, he's not scoring all the goals. It's not Gordo, who was the freshman of the year in the conference. It's these other guys, Sardarian, who's a Buffalo draft pick, and working with Jeff Mickish and Ryan Reapy over the weekend, they are able to spot really good skaters, better than I am. And when they saw Sardarian, the Russian guy, like I said, Sabres draft pick, he stands out and he's big.
Yeah.
And he scored on one of the power plays, and Kaskapurti, forward of the week in the conference, he scored on one of the power plays. Mm-hmm. Things are working for Tech, and I think Joe Sean on Saturday, we'll get to Saturday's game, but what he said is we have real depth when you look at what line is actually scoring, and he's not upset about the way those guys I mentioned before, Gordo and Chase Pietala and everything. Of course, he's a defenseman, but he gets plenty of chances at the blue line. So he's not mad about the way they're playing. He likes more so how other guys are stepping up. And I think that's totally true. The first goal was Tom Lepa, his first career goal. Not a guy we've talked about much on this podcast or elsewhere.
No.
So they're getting contributions up and down the roster. I think that bodes really well for a team early in the season trying to build up to be a championship-level team.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think for them, the guys like Gordo, he's going to get going.
Yeah.
It's still really early, right? And as soon as he gets the first one, I think you get a consistent flow from him. Now, what's so nice is that they're getting production from other lines and other guys. And if you put all that together, you're talking about a really good hockey team.
Yeah, and
Talking about it, yeah.
look, Saturday was different because they had to play from behind, and Northern had to play from ahead, which they haven't done much.
Yeah.
So that wasn't the case 32 seconds in when Lowry Ryman scored for Tech, but then NMU gets on 2 power plays. They convert on both of them. That line was really good when they were out there. Graydon Slipik scored both the power play goals in the first, and Jakob Altrichter was really impressive to me. He assisted on both of those. Just cleaning things up, keeping it in the Tech zone. They were really clean on both of those power plays, and then they get a bonus goal before the end of the first period, Medrick Bolduc, so it's 3-1 going into the second. I think everyone knew it definitely wasn't over.
Yeah.
Just given where these two teams stand, you didn't necessarily think that Tech was going to bow out for the next 40 minutes, and that certainly wasn't the case. And then you have more guys contributing that you don't necessarily expect. Marcus Pedersen, Trevor Kukkonen, who I didn't even expect to see much ice time this year.
Yeah.
He gets his first 2 collegiate goals, one on an empty net. Koska Purdy gets the other one on an empty net. In the end, it's 6-3, but it was the Sardarian goal that made it 4-3. That's the game winner. If things are just working, and I know it's Northern, they're not that talented, they're young, but at the same time, if you're Tech, you feel good about everything you're piecing together. The margin here, even with 2 empty netters, 6 for the weekend, 6 points. You're going to Ferris, who's not very good this weekend. Get 6 more points.
Yeah, no, and
Build
and
some
I agree.
separation that we did not see in the conference last year. There was none of it.
Yeah.
It was all
We
cannibalizing.
want sweeps. We want sweeps.
Yes, I
And you
agree.
need it. You need it in the CCHA. If you're a team in the CCHA, you need to be getting weekend
Or else you're
sweeps.
middling with the rest of
Yeah.
the conference. That's just,
And then you put yourself in a position at
I
the
think
end
we'll
of the
still
year.
have that. You think about Tech going on the road to Mankato or Bemidji. They're going to drop some of those.
Yeah.
They're not going to be able to sweep, but at the same time, if you build up the first couple of weekends,
Yeah.
you start stacking those points, you've already created some separation. That's pretty huge.
That bodes well to help. I'm trying to think who Michigan Tech in the CCHA should sweep. Northern, they've done it.
Ferris.
So there's if you play them twice, each team twice, right?
Mm-hmm.
So 6 points, 12 points, 18 points, 24 points. Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of impossible to ask him to sweep both times out, too. But
True, but 24 points.
I don't know. Tech's in a really good spot. Northern, it's still.
They're growing.
I think they're on track.
Yeah, they're growing.
Despite being 1-7, I do really think they are on track. It's just they're going to have to take their lumps.
Yeah, and when you're building a new program with over half of your roster is brand new freshmen, got to take your lumps.
Yeah. So Tech now 4-2 on the year. They had the 2 losses to Clarkson, but they didn't play bad. Joe Sean will tell you that. He knows when his hockey team plays bad.
Yeah.
That wasn't the case against Clarkson. Yeah. The coin just flipped the wrong way. Talk football briefly. Michigan Tech goes on the road, beats Roosevelt. Not all that convincing, Final score was 20-7, but they're 6-3. They have more wins than they did last year, so I think that says enough.
Yeah, and Dan Metlack today said, no, we were, probably wanted to score more, obviously.
Yeah.
And it became kind of this, we're not scoring, kind of built up the pressure when it's like, hey, we're up 20-0 at halftime. Like, I think we can be okay with that, right? And he said this, and I love this quote, and a lot of coaches say this: a win is a win in the GLIAC, right? As long as it goes down as a W, doesn't matter what the score is.
I agree.
Now, yeah, do you want it to be comfortable, and you want to win by a lot more? Probably, but at the same time, Roosevelt has gotten better throughout the year, right? I mean, you have to, right, as a football
I think
team.
they're a little bit better than their record shows. So I think that actually is a good sign for NMU because they did go to overtime with Roosevelt. We all would say they should have won that game, but Roosevelt's not as much of a joke as we might have once thought. So maybe NMU's not as much of a joke as we once thought, but you are what your record is.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. That's how people are going to judge you too. So yeah, maybe not how they wanted. Maybe they didn't score as much as they wanted to against Roosevelt, but they get the win. And I think it's important that they get the rivalry win. That gives you a boost. You beat Roosevelt on the road. You've got 2 wins in a row now, and you're hosting a Goliath, number 5 in the nation right now, Grand Valley State in Division II. They've got to be on. Now, I think it's key that they're at home because it's really hard to go to Grand Valley.
Absolutely. And I'd rather play Grand Valley than Ferris right now, although maybe they're hungry after losing to Ferris on their home turf. I don't know, but the Huskies, they have 2 tough ones to close out, as you mentioned, at home against Grand Valley and then on the road at Saginaw. So they might end up finishing 6-5, but I still think it's to be above 500, and we'll say they're bowl eligible if it's D1. Right?
And I think you probably give Grand Valley the edge, but at the same time,
obviously,
Michigan Tech, you're at home. Defend home field. Go out. If you play the way that they
got to play tough. I think defensively might be a struggle against Grand Valley. They did give up 51 to Ferris. Yeah. So we'll see. But it's November in Houghton, and the Lakers got to be prepared to come play in that.
Chilly, rainy, possibly, maybe snow. You never know.
Right. So it's a tough way to close things out for Tech, but like I said, they're 6-3. Got to be feeling all right. As for Northern, they're on the road to close out the last 2 weeks of the season. Davenport this weekend. Wayne State becomes the game you circle.
Yep.
Is this the week
that you win? You don't
because Davenport, you don't think it's going to happen. I mean, they played the Panthers tough down there last year, so maybe they can do that again. Obviously, it's going to be tough for them to come out on top.
Yeah,
they don't generally win games, so you'll have a tough time convincing me that they'd win.
Yeah,
this one. I think they can be in it. We'll see. They haven't changed a ton offensively. I think that it's mostly bad news since they've started running the option. It hasn't yielded many results. They've been held on under 10 points for the past 3 weeks. They might just need a quarterback in the offseason.
That might be a start to the answer of what they need. And unfortunately, you look
or better personnel to run the option. I mean, there are teams that do it.
Yeah, I mean, not Army, Air Force, right?
Yeah, the military academies do it. So, they've gone away from it a little bit more. Right? Navy's been throwing the ball a lot more. But anyway, it's offensively it's not working. So you have a tough time convincing me that they're going to put up enough points to beat Davenport. Yeah. But Wayne State, if it was at the Superior Dome, I'd say they should win that game. But going on the road, it will be tough. And becomes the game you got to win.
Yeah, and I look
to avoid going 0-22 the last 2 seasons.
Yeah, and I look at Wayne State's schedule.
Think about how that would change the offseason.
True, you end on. I mean, let's start. Yeah, you end.
You end on your only high note.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, your only high note in 2 years.
Yeah.
Really. And I know it's hard because, looking from the outside in, you judge a team on wins and losses, right? Like.
Yeah.
And to get better, I mean, I've watched enough to say, like, until they win, I can't really say that they've gotten any better, right? I've watched enough of it. And it's a struggle. It's not easy. It doesn't happen overnight. It's not they're just a phenomenal football team now. the tough thing about Wayne State is when you look at their schedule this year, they also have not won yet. They play Roosevelt this week.
Correct.
And then they close.
That'll be a good gauge.
That'll be a good gauge.
If we're playing transitive property, okay, and you went to overtime with Roosevelt, what happens in this Roosevelt-Wayne State game?
Yeah.
Maybe we could guess a little bit better. But, yeah, obviously a big 2 weeks for Northern in the future of their football program. We'll see. I'm sure a lot of people are on edge over there about what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So we'll see. Let's briefly back to volleyball. Great weekend for NMU. Great week. They get 3 wins. Yeah. That 5-setter we talked about on Friday was a thrill, and then they go out and get 2 more wins. So Northern on a tear. Tech. It's a tough spot and a tough time to be going through a rough stretch.
Yeah, and I think you saw it and I know this is going back a little bit. You saw it in the rivalry game up in the MAC.
Well, that has to be so deflating.
To be close, to be so close.
Well, have it called that you won.
Yeah, have it called.
And then you don't win.
And then you don't win. Yeah.
I mean, obviously it wasn't taken from them because they got the call right. But, at the same time, you think about how they responded after that one with 2 sweeps of Parkside and Purdue Northwest. Northern goes to 5, actually, with Parkside. So, I don't know. Both teams we've talked about all year are
good.
Impressive to us.
Yeah, they're pretty. They're playing good ball, and I think when they're at that level, it's really exciting to watch from a fan perspective, from a sports reporter perspective, because they have the talent, and if they put the pieces together, you could see them doing something special this year.
Yeah. So the Huskies now above 500 in conference, 7-6. They're 13-10 overall. I mean, Northern's been a little bit more consistent this season, but everything's on the table for them. National tournament, I think both of them, really. Yeah. And Tech going into the GLIAC tournament, they have no reason not to feel good about that either.
Yeah, to say, hey, we can do this.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens. 2 more weeks of the regular season before that gets underway. Both teams have Ferris State. Might not be fun on the road for all 4, NMU, and then Davenport, Lake State, and Saginaw Valley State.
So I think key to get out of those 4, I think key to get 2 or probably 3.
2 or 3. Yeah.
So
we'll see what happens. And before we get to Alex Fatovic, let's talk men's and women's soccer at both schools. Where do you want to start?
Let's start with women's soccer because the big one. I would say the decider coming up for the NMU women's soccer team, sitting at the top of the conference right now.
It's huge, yeah. I mean, I said this to John Sandoval earlier, would you want it any other way, right?
Yeah, I mean,
that you have this big game against Grand Valley. They're on the road. That's going to be tough. It was a 1-0 loss to Grand Valley back in September. So the Wildcats are just playing outstanding soccer right now, though.
Yeah, 17 goals in their last 5. Don't quote my math.
Well, their last 3 is 13 goals. 13 nothing. They've outscored their opponents. Yeah. GLIAC opponents. So these are supposed to be tough games, and right now they're not for the Wildcats. So they have some big time positive momentum going into the huge game that is Grand Valley State this weekend.
Yeah, which very well could decide the conference. Now they both have one more game after that, but very well this could decide the conference here, pending results of obviously their last regular season game.
That's huge. Yeah.
Keys for Northern, I believe last year when they went to Grand Valley, they won 1-0. I believe so. I want to say so. I think they also split last year.
I think you're right. Yeah.
So keys for Northern, start early, and continue to put. You've scored 13 goals in your last 3 games, so your foot has been on the gas. So when you start that, put your foot on the gas early, and then you hear John Sandoval say it on the sideline after they score a goal. The next 5 minutes after that become then the most important thing. What do you do in the next 5 once you find a goal? because you're playing on the road at Grand Valley. It's not an easy place to go play, and they're going to be, it's not as amped
Well,
up.
at this point, Grand Valley knows that NMU is on their level.
Yeah,
In a lot of sports, that's
not the case.
no. Maybe Ferris is in volleyball, and NMU in volleyball this year is knocking on the door.
Yeah.
And in a sport like that, you can knock off one of the top teams just by having a good night. In football, there's a lot of separation there between those two schools and the rest of the conference. So, yeah, it's interesting knowing that's true. So that one's coming your way Thursday. You can stream it, and we'll have the score for you on your TV6 Late News. But, yeah, I'm really, really looking forward to that one. Same thing for Tech, going on the road at Saginaw and at Grand Valley to close out the regular season. I think it's not over, but I think it's been a positive year under Melissa Kuhar. They just don't have the goal scoring that they need, and I think that's a need to address in the offseason.
Yeah, and I think, they go and they
beat Roosevelt, lost to Parkside.
Yeah, and then earlier in the year, Saginaw. What was that result?
Oh, that's a good question. 1-0.
Yeah,
they lost.
So a game that you're in, you just got to
lost
find a
to
goal.
Grand Valley 2-1. They were number one in the country at the time.
A game that you're in,
So defensively, this is a really good team.
Yeah.
We've been saying that
goal,
all year.
Yeah, find a goal or two goals, and you could be talking about coming away with some points this weekend.
Yep.
Putting yourself in a position in the GLIAC tournament.
Final weekend of the regular season now for the men's team at NMU. The final weekend was this past weekend, and they close it out on a high note, but that also means with the results of the rest of their conference season, they're not getting into the GLIAC tournament, which is a bummer, but, and we'll talk about this with Alex Fatovic, they really ended it as best you could.
Yeah.
A really tough Parkside team, which Fatovic said they don't like each other. They don't beat around the bush there. They don't like each other. They're conference foes, and they haven't been able to beat Parkside historically. And they were ranked coming in here earlier in the season. Yeah. That was a 1-0 loss. Well, the 89th minute, David Morin strikes it, man.
Gosh, man. And
so 1-0 win for NMU. It was, you showed me the video. It was so funny.
Electric. Yeah.
Because the guys were fired up, and they knew it didn't mean anything. They knew they weren't getting in.
Yeah.
Because they fell to Purdue 3-0 on Friday. So, and they know that they needed to have that one before Sunday's match, but Sunday's match they still played like it mattered.
Yeah.
And I think that's the important part.
Yeah. The announcers, it looks like it's their Super Bowl, and it was. And, we'll talk with Fatovic about that, Yeah.
That's fine. That's
Play
how it
spoiler.
goes sometimes.
Yeah.
NMU hockey, guess what? There might be a Super Bowl in March for them when they're playing, I don't know, Mankato or something and trying to keep them out of the tournament.
Yeah. Yeah. So
that's okay.
I love it. I love it. And it shows the passion that they have for the game, and they get it done. You show that you're competing with those top teams, right?
Yeah.
And you think about the GLIAC standings, 1 point, and you're in, right?
Yeah, I mean, the margins are so thin. We get into this with Fatovic, about how short the season is and just how you're going like it's a tournament all the time. And with that, we will throw it to our interview with the head coach of NMU men's soccer, Alex Fatovic. Here he is on the Wildcats season.
All right, well, we're joined now here on UP Power with head coach of NMU men's soccer, Alex Fatovic. Coach, it's great to have you here. Excited to talk about the season that you've had. And I think, Kevin, we got to start with the last regular season game. I think that was an interesting one. You guys go on the road and get the job done. So talk a little bit about that game. I mean, no goals until the last minute, and you guys find one. Intensity. What kind of went on?
Well, look, I mean, you could say it was a meaningless game, right? So those are always kind of the toughest ones to get your players up for. But our group was really motivated because we felt like it was the start of the next season. And we had a lot to prove because, Parkside's a perennial team. They're defending champs. To win at their place on senior day would have been a big step for us. So they were up for it from the first minute. And it was just a classic GLIAC battle where I think as the game went on, we had the better chances. We were in control. But it took a stroke of magic from Hazi in the top corner. I think it's one of the best goals we scored all season. I mean, Tommy will disagree, but as a true striker will. But that was just an incredible goal, and it came off of playing a little bit more direct at first. Came from the goalkeeper. We got it out wide in the other half, and then we kind of bypassed everybody and had an opportunity to run at them. And sure enough, I mean, Hazi had just had a shot like that, 5 minutes prior that was really close. So I think he was just feeling it, and he got that moment. And I didn't realize it was like 60 seconds to go, when I look back. So it was just an unbelievable moment, and I don't think our guys cared about running on the field to celebrate. There wasn't another game, so it was fun. It was fun for the guys, and I think that it was a great feeling to end like that. When you can win a game when it doesn't really matter, it just shows how much your kids care. Because you could easily tank that game and say the season's over, let's mail it in, but they went for it, and it was deserved, and it kind of shows the rest of the region and the conference that we should not be overlooked moving forward, for sure.
Absolutely. It was a true golazo
really.
in that moment.
It definitely was.
An incredible strike, but
Yeah.
we talked earlier about your guys really enjoying that moment,
Yeah.
even though it didn't mean they were moving on to the postseason or
Yeah.
anything. Just did they also relish the fact that they were playing spoiler a little bit for the team on the other side?
I think so. To be honest, we don't like Parkside. You know what I mean? And
Yep.
they beat us here 1-0 at our place. So for once, we went down there and we were the jerks. We were the bad guys. And we've been looking for that. We've been looking for us trying to be kind of the enforcers. And they did that. And a little rainy, little wet grass gives a little bit more ability to slide in and win some big tackles, and so the game got physical, and our guys, again, the young guys, stepped up and won the physicality battle, and it was a true golazo. But I think they just, all the frustration and disappointments finally came out in a positive way, and that's got to be the message moving into our off-season programs and into next year was, if you can do that for 90 minutes every game, you're winning the conference. And they showed they can do that, and I think that's been the biggest part, is that you've seen 30 minutes of quality soccer, you've seen 45 minutes, but then there's a drop. We'll dominate a team, not get a goal, and then we'll concede, and now we're chasing, the game's changed. And it's a different outlook. And so for us, we just had our foot on the pedal the whole time for 90 minutes, and they proved they could do it. So, it was a fun day. It was enjoyable for them. One of our seniors, Logan, is from Milwaukee and knows Parkside very well, knew their players. So for him to kind of have a walk-off like that, it was just an awesome day. And the guys felt it. And it was enjoyable, and it gave us a good sense that, there really is something here. It's not just, a flash in a pan. Like, there is something moving forward. And, it was an enjoyable trip home for sure.
To make an American football reference,
Yeah.
it felt a little bit like the Lions in 2022 when they went into Green Bay. They were out of the playoffs,
Right.
but they could keep the Packers out of the playoffs,
Yeah.
and they did that.
Yeah.
And you saw what that did for that group
Right.
last year, now this year. Do you feel like that is a huge momentum builder
do.
going into
I
the
do.
future of your program?
I do, because again, we're so young. We're so young, and when you bring in 19 new players, you really don't know what the chemistry is going to be like. And I think it's pretty good for being so short. But we have to look at it in the span of a year. We've only been together 2.5 months. They just cram all these games in and call it a season. But really, if you look at what the EPL is like, or MLS, like those soccer seasons are so long. So if you have a 3-game slide, there's time to fix it. There's time to work those kinks out and get back in it. But really, college soccer is more like a tournament. So if you have a rough stretch and you don't get your points, then you could be out of the playoffs even though you're a good team. And I think that we learned a hard lesson, and it's difficult not to be playing moving forward. But I think it should galvanize the group. They already are asking, hey, when can we train again? What's the plan moving forward? Let's get back on the field. And NCAA rules tell us we've got to give them 2 weeks off. So, that was an easy answer. But it just tells you they're hungry and they're motivated, and I think they really enjoy the environment and the support that they get. That I don't think other GLIAC soccer teams get, including things like this. And I think it's all part of our sort of culture that, this is the place you want to be if you're going to play college soccer. You get support, you got the facilities, you guys are on TV, there's support, and that goes a long way with athletes in this day and age. And that's what we're hearing on the recruiting trail. Like, what's your top priority? What's the most important to you? You're not always, hey, the best offer, or am I going to play right away? It's continuously been, I want to go to a school that has a great team culture. I want to enjoy the environment I'm in. I want to go to a place that they care about me. And we have that. And I think that's going to be a big part of our push and finishing our recruiting cycle for next year.
To give people context of your season,
Yeah.
6-8-2, you finished 3-8-1 in conference, but
Yeah.
that's tripling the amount of wins
Yeah.
overall and in conference. That growth doesn't happen overnight, but you made it happen from one season to the next. How did you, establish that as a coach and get the buy-in from your players in the offseason to make this a successful year?
Yeah, I think it was a team effort, as always. Obviously, we had to replace Adam last year. We brought in Chance, and he's been phenomenal, bringing in a fresh set of eyes on, hey, what are we missing? And he came from a UCCS who was in the tournament last year, but this year they're going to be again, but they're always been in the top 10 all year. So he brought a fresh perspective, like what's really needed. So that was a big piece of our recruiting was increasing our coaching staff. And we just used the winter period where we get a climate-controlled environment to train every day, regardless of what's going on outside. So we had that. We just took our opportunity to train hard every day and build a culture where physicality, energy, being up for it, those things are kind of intangible, are also part of our style of play, not just possession or passing or combinations. It's the physicality, it's the being up for it, the energy that you guys have witnessed on the sideline and can report about. That has to be there every day. Through the stuff that you don't want to do, through the lifting in the morning or the video sessions or the training sessions that maybe you're not up for. You have to bring it. Because then when you get to a game where maybe you're not feeling it, but you still find a way to have that energy. So I think it was a team effort in the offseason, but it comes down to the recruiting class, to be honest. These guys were able to step on the field and be able to compete right away. So the recruiting class, but also the leadership group that created this sort of sense of culture in the offseason, and then brought them in and didn't say, oh, you're the freshman, you guys get all the stuff, and the typical sort of approach to what first-year players are. No, it wasn't any of that. It was, we're one team, we're going to do this all together, let's get by them. So I think it's a combination of the recruiting class, our leadership, Tommaso coming back and doing what he did as a leader, as well as Ale and Logan. I think it was just a team effort, and people really care about our program, and I think that's the biggest piece, is they care. And so that way you can kind of turn the knob up a little bit when it's like intensity is needed, the expectations, the demands. If kids don't care, if they don't feel cared about, it's going to be really hard to get them to do that. So I think that's a big part of it as well. So recruiting, team effort, leadership, coaching, and you look at the 6-8-2 record, I think it could be 10-4-2, to be fair, if you look at some of the results we had. So I don't think we're far off, and maybe this is the sort of disappointing taste in our mouth of not moving on will hopefully motivate us to take that next step where the standards and expectations are driven by the players only and not the coaching staff. So
You mentioned Tommaso being a leader for you. Alessandro Shalanga, we were saying all year, get the ball to the Italians. Kicking and screaming, one of my favorite movies of all time. But Tommaso really showed who he was this season, didn't he?
He did, and it's all passion, right? And that's what we want to get out of our guys. You have to play the game with passion, and he does that day in and day out. Now, he was limping across the finish line with his injuries, and a lot of people don't know how banged up he is, and there was a lot of times where he's the senior that couldn't really train. It was like, don't train, you're good, like, get healthy. So, he just drove the team with his passion, and that's what you need. And I think that's the biggest part. Obviously, he's got skill and quality and ability to finish the ball and those sorts of things. He doesn't lose it very often. He grinds, but it's his passion and how much he cares about the team. And I think what's amazing about Tommaso is typically in fall sports, especially in soccer, when you're done with your senior year, you're done for the rest of the year. Like those seniors will ride off in the sunset and enjoy the rest of their sort of college experience. And I said, well, what are you going to do in the wintertime? Are you going to go home, maybe do online classes? And kind of testing him out a little bit, and he said, no, coach, I'm going to be here. I said, well, why? Why would you come back? He said, I want to help this team. And so he looks at his role as the captaincy of not just being for the fall season, but for the full year, to help continue to guide these young guys and drive that passion. So I think that's what's, he leads by example. He does the talking and the speeches, and that's part of being a captain. But as he said before, he does his talking on the field with his passion and his work rate. So hopefully he set a great example for the young group, and we have a great relationship. I think Tommaso and I are very honest with each other, and I think that's also a good demonstration to the other players. Like this is what it takes. Like we have to have a relationship with your players and your coaches to make that step, and he's demonstrated that as well. So hopefully the players have seen that, and will feel comfortable to come into the office and to ask questions and to be closer with, because then I can push him harder. I'm harder on Tommaso than any other player. That's what makes him a good captain, is because he can handle that critique and the coaching, and maybe some players aren't as comfortable with that. So I think that's the most telling part, is I can go up to Tommaso straight up and say, hey, you did not play well today. What's going on? And yeah, he might disagree with me 100%, but it's not going to affect our relationship, because I know that he's going to go out and give everything the next practice or the next game, and he knows that I'm going to give everything. And I think that's what a true coach to captain relationship should be like.
Yeah, and Coach, you were talking about toughness, and I think a tough guy that I saw this year, Logan Lazar, going out there and doing the job, right?
Yeah.
Every time, the minutes that he gave and stuff like that. To see him grow as a player, what was that experience like?
Oh man, Logan's awesome. You guys know he's gonna continue on and coach with us. He's gonna be back in Marquette, but my path with Logan started when I got here 2 years ago, where he was kind of one of the guys that I inherited, that it was right onto the field, like he's fit, athletic, but struggled a bit to play our style of play with a technical part, and so he had some ups and downs through his path, and through everything, he's just even though it's done this, he still ended up here and started here, and I think that's such a telling sign of his personality and his character, that he never gave up. He kept working hard, cared about his team, found a way to find a role on the field, whether he was a starter or off the bench, or some games he didn't even play. There's games this season that he had 0 minutes, and it never stopped him from continuing to care about his team and give everything. And so I think it speaks volumes for his character and his leadership, and those are the type of guys you need to fill your locker room with. You can't all have Tommasos and Ales. Like those guys are exceptional when it comes to their ability and their pedigree. But you also need a bunch of Logan Lazars, because they're physical, they're tough, they give everything, and that's what you need. And Logan, I think it's been awesome to see his maturation, and for him to walk off the way he did, as we talked about on Sunday, it makes you feel really good as a coach, because I know he was happy, and that's what you want your seniors leaving with. You want them feeling good about it. And for him to come back and coach, I think it signals something to everybody. Like, why would you go back and coach for a team or a program that you don't like? You don't, and if they're sticking around and want to be a part of it, it tells you what it's like to be in our locker room.
Coach, we talked about the women's program at NMU this year and how they've gone through the stage of building a championship team that you're at right now. I mean, when you look at what they've been able to accomplish with their fourth, fifth year players, not only this season, last season, and they have more runway here to go. Just how much do you look at what John does? And I know you guys talk quite a bit. How does that help you?
It helps me a lot. I mean, John's been really supportive of myself personally as a coach, as well as all the other head coaches at NMU. I think that's what makes it such a great place to work, because everybody's supportive of each other, and there's a lot of success going on. So as a young coach myself, you've got to look at other examples and say, well, what are you doing? And I think the advice that John has given me that sort of rings true is just trust the process. Just keep trusting your process. You're a good coach. Keep doing what you're doing, and so, if he's witnessing what we're doing and he's believing in what we're doing, then we must be on the right track. Because he's done the same thing. He took over a team that wasn't great and turned it into a regional power, and I think it's because he's built good culture, and those girls are tough, and they've played together for a long time. They know each other. They like each other, and that serves the team so well on the field. You see how they play. They know what they're doing. They know what each team member is doing, and so to have that for 3-4 years, that's what it should be like. So we've definitely watched that, and it's been part of our process as well. So if we can keep these guys together like they did for the next 3 years, then hopefully we're going to be in the same position where we're playing for the regional titles and looking to go to the Final Four. Because, like we talked about Lewis, right? Lewis just won the GLVC. We tied them at home earlier this season. They're going to be a team that's going to be in the NCAA tournament. Why not us? Why not us? So that's the goal. And when you get to the NCAA tournament, especially in the Midwest region or our super region, the Final Four is not that far away, right? It's not an unattainable goal for us. And I know that we're sitting here out of the playoffs like, what is this guy talking about, Final Four? But that's within our grasp if we can reach our full potential. So I think the women's program is a great example of doing it right, taking the time, trusting the process, not worrying about getting flashes in the pan and a lot of transfers in that are maybe 1 or 2 year players. No, if you start with a good core of freshman players and treat them well and give them the experience, then the future is bright. So I think it's a good example of what we're trying to do.
The other cool thing, I think, when they're inevitably home for part of the GLIAC tournament, your guys are going to be out there. They're going to be loud.
They'll be there. Yeah, they'll be there. They enjoy that stuff. They really do. At all the games. They're at basketball, they're at hockey. So, but, obviously the soccer programs are very close and are supportive. So, yeah, they enjoy that. They do. And I wish we could get some of that on our side. Our games are a little bit more too quiet. So I'm going to work on creating some sort of supporters club. But I think it just shows like what how close the programs are and how supportive we are, and we got to work together. We share the fields, we share practice time. We have to work together, and I think that's what's been amazing about John, is I'm the freshman. I was the new guy coming in, and for him to kind of take me under his wing and give me an idea of what it's like at Northern and Marquette and the community and the GLIAC. It's just been amazing, and our players at the same time want to support them, and I think that's how it should be. To be honest, it should be a good relationship between the soccer programs, and we have that here. And I can't say that for, programs across the country. Sometimes there is friction between men's and women's soccer, and I think that comes down to coaches, working together. And John's been great for that, and hopefully that continues, obviously.
Yeah, most definitely. And I think, and you kind of brought it up, you're out of the playoffs, but only by 1 point, and this was something that I wanted both of your opinions on. Yeah. You get ties in soccer, but you don't get any extra time. You don't get a penalty shootout.
Yeah.
And we talked about, for safety of players, but is that something that you want to see in Division II soccer make its way back?
Because there would be some opportunities to, if you get an extra 20 minutes, would we find a goal? Would we find a chance to win? And everything's about, player health and player safety in the NCAA, which we agree with. But if you're playing Friday, Sunday, it's still not good for their health. So what's another 20 minutes at that point?
Right.
You know what I mean? Playing a little bit extra time. So I think it would definitely add some flavor to the matches. I've lost some brutal overtime games in college. There was one game at Marshall back in the day where we were at home and it was a second overtime. There was literally 8 seconds left. And we had a long throw in, and I was like, hey, let it be the last shot, let it be the last shot. But the kid just threw it in quick, and boom, 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 up they go. 1 second left on the clock. Double overtime, we lost at home. So, so it goes both ways, right? Be careful what you wish for. So, but yeah, it would be nice to have those extra opportunities to grab some points because, when you're in a conference like ours, it was a GLIAC, we've got 7 teams, and they're all good. So there's no way to separate yourselves. And this year, it was the year of the ties. Like ties were massive for a lot of teams, especially Lewis. Lewis tied 7 games, and they won the GLVC.
That's how the Tech women were last year and snuck into the NCAAs because they had a bunch of ties.
Bunch of ties, and you don't lose, and you get good ties against good RPI teams, and you pick up the wins you should. So, if you look at our sort of record, we lost some close 1-0 games. If those are ties, I think we're talking about a completely different story right now. And that's something that our guys got to learn. That from a tactical perspective, we want to win games, but when you're on the road at St. Cloud and you haven't been playing well, but you find yourself 1-1 in the 80th minute, you just understand, look, we're getting out of here with something. That tie in the first conference game of the year would be in the playoffs right now.
Yeah. I think it adds a little more drama if you do get some extra time, overtime.
For you guys in the stories.
I love college hockey overtime. It's 3-on-3. There's always something happening. It only lasts 5 minutes, but rarely do you actually see it go to a shootout because a lot of times they score on that. I agree with you there. The other thing I wanted to talk about with you is your work with the youth soccer around Marquette, Marquette United, and why was that something you wanted to prioritize as the head coach at NMU too?
Well, it's just my passion for the game, and we're in an area where it's still a developing game. Mainly because of our weather environment. Like we can't play soccer year round, and we're sort of short on indoor facilities. But it's such a passion of mine. I did the same thing in West Virginia. I helped build up a club there called West Virginia Football Club, and through my time there, and you guys can kind of check the rosters. So there's 2 players. One's Ryan Holmes, the other one's Max Trethway. One right now is Ryan's with Marshall, who's in the top 5. Yeah. Max is with WVU. They've been number 1 at some point this year. WVU was in the Final Four last year, and those were West Virginia homegrown players that I developed and helped coach at 12 years old, and they're playing at the highest level of Division I. So I know there's a pathway to do that, and it starts at the grassroots. So when Marquette asked me to help, I said, I'd love to help, but I want to help at the youngest age groups. Let's start at the 7, 8, 9-year-olds and create training habits and create expectations for the parents, and what is it really like, what's our ceiling, and what's the commitment level that it's going to take to get those players into a position to be recruited. So honestly, I think it's our duty as college coaches and be at the highest level of soccer coaching in the UP to give back.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's what's beautiful about NMU is it's part of the community, and so that's our way of giving back. It's fun, I enjoy it, but I think for us, they support us. You know, the soccer players and the soccer community supports NMU men's and women's soccer. So I think it's our duty to give back. But also, you've seen it gives opportunities for our players to try coaching out. Maybe it's a profession they want to go into, or at least a hobby. Gives them opportunity to referee, make some extra change, but also for them to feel connected to the community. So I think it's all a big cycle where you help in the community and help grow the game. And we have a big soccer community here. I think it's kind of goes under the radar because it's a hockey town and you don't see a lot of it. But our club has like 400 players plus the rec. So if we can develop this thing and get some people behind it, I don't see why we can't be sending players, both men and women, to college. And it doesn't have to be NMU, but playing college soccer from Marquette, I think that's possible. So that's my end goal. But that was kind of the reason I got involved, was I wanted to start at the grassroots level and help them grow.
The other part of it is a lot of your players are international, so it's important for them to feel like they're a part of a community as well, and that helps them do it.
I think so too, and many of our international players come from smaller towns, more rural towns in Europe, and in those towns there's always a village club that is soccer, and everybody in the village or the small town gets behind it. They're at the games, whether it's, it doesn't have to be a top level, it could be the highest men's amateur level. It's so organized over there that there's going to be a clubhouse, there's going to be socials, it's the connection to the community. So I think at the end they relish that, they enjoy that part. It wasn't hard to get them out to the Marquette High School game to support those guys, because it's just what you do. It's just, that's what soccer is to people. It's passion. And so for them, I think it's a big part of the new players to say, hey, when you come over here, you're not just part of like the NMU soccer team, you're part of a bigger community that's very, very passionate about sports, health, recreation, NMU specifically. So they need to see that. They need to know that they're playing and representing more than just themselves. And I think the club is a great way to show them that. Yeah.
Right. Last thing for me, I think, as you go into the winter, I know you got the setup in the dome when you can get it. Just after these 2 weeks are up, are mandated for you guys to sit down. What does the off season look like for you guys building up to next year when you're out there again?
Yeah, it's a good question. So one of the first things we want to do is we want to make sure that we get into a really good strength program for our first year players that maybe haven't been in a strength program at their previous clubs, because it's not necessarily emphasized at the youth level like it should be. So that's one area that we can find results in right away and just grind it. So we've already kind of started that process of scheduling our lifting and figuring out what we're going to do each day of the week. Obviously we're mandated to have a restriction in the amount of hours we can train, but now we can actually practice 4 to 5 times a week and lift 3 times a week without having to worry about recovery or getting ready for the next match. That's like a 4 times increase in the amount of practice that we can actually do in season right now. So for us, it's about just practicing, grinding, building up the things that we struggled at this year on a day in and day out basis that we couldn't necessarily do when you're in the GLIAC. When you play Friday, Sunday, Friday, Sunday, Friday, Sunday for 8 straight weeks, there's a lot of players that are getting left behind in terms of the training environment, especially young players that maybe aren't getting on the field. So now it's their time. It's their time to prove that they can play. It's their time to sort of show that they are capable of performing in the fall season. So for us, it's a really important part of the year. We don't look at it as like off-season training. We're kind of half in, half out. No, it's full go. We train every night, and we utilize the dome to its full capacity. So the music's on, the video board's on, and we play a lot of gold-green games and get these guys to mimic what it's like to play matches from a fitness perspective. And then after the spring break season, we'll have 5 games. We'll have 5 play dates where we're going to play some big matches. We're going to go down to UW Green Bay, so we've got a Division I team in there, and we've got some other teams coming up to the Dome. And so then we'll kind of transition from a training camp environment back into kind of a mini season environment where it's more about focused on preparing yourself for a match. So we'll mimic the fall season as best we can when it comes to that part. But that first 6 weeks when you come back from Christmas break, it's about the grind. You know what I mean? It's cold out, the snow's there, like you're in classes, there's no traveling to games, so you gotta embrace it. And that's where we're gonna really push these guys to get to the next level. Because they're not satisfied. They're yes, they know they can play and they feel a little bit hard done by, but our core group of guys is not satisfied with the result of this season. And so I expect them to use that as motivation to work hard every single night in the dome. We might leave the dome and there might be 8 inches of snow that just fell in between the start of practice and the end of practice. And you know what? And that doesn't matter. That's part of our environment here. That's what you need to embrace. And I think it's what makes NMU and our environment special, unique to college soccer, because no one else has that.
Yep.
You know, no one else has this huge dome where we can utilize to the full capacity. So it's going to be a lot of work, and we're excited about it, because usually you have less players, because you have so many seniors leave that maybe your training group is more like 14, 15 players and a couple goalies. But we only lost 3 guys, and they're all coming back for the winter semester. So we have a full slate of 28 players coming back for winter season. So that means that it's competitive to get in that inter-squad scrimmage. You don't want to be one of the 2 guys that's sitting out. So every practice, every game is going to be competitive, and we're going to push these guys to make sure that the season like this doesn't happen again.
That's huge. Coach Alex Fatovic, thank you for the time today.
Thank you so much.
Awesome stuff. And that'll do it for this edition of the UP Power Podcast. Tune in again next week. We'll have much more to talk about. It's crossover season, Keegan, but thanks for being here.